Spreading of Diseases, The Importance of Hand Washing for Speech 205. My name is Kelly Raines. As we all know, kids do not want to wash themselves, let alone their hands. Trying to get my son to wash his hands after he's been outside is like trying to get a lion to snuggle with me. It's impossible. He will come up with every reason not to wash his hands. One of my favorite excuses from him is, "But Mommy, it's not like I'm going to get sick or anything. It's only dirt, and God made dirt, and dirt don't hurt." I just look at him and say, "Son, if you only knew." According to Eugene Nestor, in his book Microbiology, A Human Perspective, he states if your hands are visibly dirty, then wash them with soap and water. Most kids don't understand the importance of hand washing. They don't know that if they do not wash their hands, they could spread diseases, and most of the time they think germs are okay. Kids are not the only ones who need to be taught how to wash their hands properly. It's really important in the healthcare setting as well. That is where most of the disease spreading happens, in the healthcare setting. If you're a healthcare worker who does not wash his or her hands after they've come in contact with blood, bodily fluid, or even excretion, there's a possibility they can spread diseases like MRSA or staph. Those two diseases can kill a person if not treated right. That's why the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, recommends you wash your hands after using the restroom, handled food, touched an animal, coughed, or dealt with someone who's been sick, which that it states on their website, www.cdc.gov. They also explain to you how to use hand sanitizer such as this if soap or clean running water is not available. Another form of hand washing is a surgical hand washing. As Peter Hoffman says in his book, Disinfection in Healthcare, the reason why surgeons wash their hands is to remove and kill bacteria and reduces the regrowth of resident microflora in a surgical procedure. Now that may sound confusing to some of you, including myself, so I will put it in a way for you to understand. He was basically saying that the surgeon must wash his or her hands before each surgery so he or she does not cause the patient to have any type of infection or get any diseases from the surgery. That way the surgeon washes their hands is more extensive than, say, a nurse or a CMA would wash their hands due to the fact that there is more at risk than normal. When washing your hands, you want to make sure your skin is not overly dry or does not have any open wounds on them. That way you will not harbor any germs or bacteria. Also, as the CDC states on their website, most people have a tendency to touch their faces, their eyes, and their mouths without even realizing it. I am guilty of that myself. That is how we get sick, because the germs get in our body that way. It also states that if people are taught how to wash their hands properly and actually wash their hands after eating or using a restroom in their community, that can help reduce the number of people who get sick by diarrhea by 31%, as well as the number of people with weakened immune systems who have a diarrheal illness by 59%. Plus, they will reduce the number of people who get a common cold due to a respiratory illness by 21%. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but in the big scheme of things, that's pretty big. As a healthcare worker, I wash my hands before and after I see each patient. I make sure my hands are dry thoroughly. Bacteria thrives on wetness from our hands. You also want to pat your hands with a paper towel and do not rub them dry. My hands will become very dry during the winter months due to the cold, but with the help of a moisturizing lotion, my hands do not crack or bleed from being overly dry. I will even wash my hands after wearing gloves, such as these. The reason for that is, even though I have gloves on, they can still get holes in them, and I can still run the risk of spreading bacteria. I have also found it helps the patient feel better if I wash my hands in front of them. It shows them that I use good hygiene and I do not want them to catch any bacteria or any germs. I also wash my hands after cleaning up from a small surgical procedure like a cyst removal or even applying sutures if someone has cut themselves. Now, I may not be the one who actually does the surgery on the patient, but it's still just as important that I wear the gloves and wash my hands before and after each procedure. One way of spreading diseases too is by not changing my gloves. Let's say I go into a room with a patient and they have a cut that require stitches. Now, I may not know that they have MRSA, which, as I stated earlier, is a deadly disease. Once the doctor has put the stitches in, I will proceed to clean the patient and bandage his or her wound. I will put on a clean pair of gloves at that point and proceed with the cleaning of the wound. Now that I have finished with the cleanup, I suddenly get a call from another room that there is an emergency. I do not change my gloves because there's no time for the fact that the patient is bleeding profusely. If I touch that patient with my already contaminated glove from the first patient, I may have just given that new patient MRSA. If a patient has not washed their hands before and after they have been around somebody who is sick or is sick themselves, that is another way to spread germs and bacteria. You can spread bacteria from shopping carts or even touching stuff on a shelf because someone who has been sick or been around someone who is sick just touched that particular product right before you. Now that I have said that, I want you to see just how much bacteria is on our hands. With my helper, I will put some of this glow germ on his hands, and he's going to rub them together. Now, this gel will glow under a UV light. This is used for training purposes. It's stimulated germs, glows under ultraviolet light, and is for training of aspect techniques such as hand washing. Now what I'm going to do, I don't know if you can see or not, flip your hands over, which it doesn't look like it. If you look on his nail right here, which you can barely see, you'll see some of the stuff glowing. That shows that he's got germs around his fingernails. So now what he's going to do is he's going to go wash his hands very well, and when he comes back, we'll see if there's any germs left. This is an important thing to use because it's going to teach those who are learning how to wash their hands properly, especially in the healthcare field setting. And to quote Peter Nestor from his book, Microbiology, A Human Perspective, thorough hand washing with soap and water is the most important step in stopping the spreading of infectious diseases. This is why it's very important that we wash our hands as often as possible. You do not want a loved one to get sick. You do not want yourself to get sick. So I cannot stress enough the importance of washing your hands. Now when he comes back, we're going to see if he's got anything left on there. And hopefully he will be germ-free as I have taught him how to properly wash his hands. And I apologize for the delay that it is taking him so long, but he wants to make sure his hands are good and dry because, as I stated earlier, bacteria thrives on wetness. Which I don't see any, and as you can see, if we should have closed the blind, he has washed his hands properly. So thank you for taking the time to listen to how important it is to wash your hands to reduce the risk of spreading diseases. Thank you very much.